Okay, good morning. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, welcome. My name is Karen A., and I'm with you here from Jerusalem, Israel. I want to welcome you to the Reco12 podcast. We welcome you from wherever you are in the world, in whatever fellowship you're in, whether you're suffering from alcohol, drugs, workaholism, sex and love addiction, codependency, Al-Anonism, and you name it. Reco12 brings together a fellowship of spearheads, intelligent agent spearheads of God's everlasting creation, many of whom have recovered through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous and various recovery programs. It is my pleasure to invite today Ina. Ina will be sharing with us about her journey, her experience, strength, and hope working the 12 steps. And you could jot down your questions or put them in the chat as she's speaking. Ina will share for about 25 minutes. And Ina, I could give you a little bit of a 5-minute warning. And then we'll be able to take some questions live as Ina shares her recovery journey and her inspiration for us as we all work through our programs. This meeting is recorded. So whether you're here live or you hear it recording, I'm sure you'll get a lot out of it. Thank you, Ina. We look forward to hearing from you and learning a little bit about you and your program. Thank you.
You said 5 to 10 minutes?
You have 20 to 25 minutes, and I could give you a 5-minute warning.
Okay. Let's see. I'll give it my best to try to do that. Okay. All righty. Thank you for asking me to speak, Karen. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be of service, especially right now at this part in my life. I want to say that first. My name is Ina. I'm an alcoholic addict. I do AA. That's where I found my place, but I also, come from a background not with just alcohol. I'll say a couple things really quickly. I don't want to spend too much time talking about what it was like before, but I do want to say a couple things that I definitely am an alcoholic and an addict from a young age. I exhibited addictive behaviors. I exhibited overthinking, not being able to sleep at night when I do something wrong. I was very manipulative from a young age. I can look back now and I can see I think if I look back, already at 7, I for sure know that I was an addict, an alcoholic, the way that I thought, the way that I moved. And, so food was my first thing that I kind of like my mom would try to control, and it would hurt me when she would take it away from me. So it was like my happy place. And then by the time I was 12, I started to use drugs in middle school, not like heavy drugs. By 13, I was already using heavy drugs. And then I spent a lot of years drinking and using other substances. And what I would always do is instead of seeing that I had a problem, when one substance stopped working, I changed it to a different one. And the same thing went with friends, boys. When one thing didn't work, when one thing wasn't giving me what I needed, it could be a friend, it could be a boy, it could have been a substance, it could have been whatever it was. When that no longer was working for me, I quickly moved to something else. I couldn't just be alone in my own skin. And so yeah, why I bring all this up is I said, I wrote this. I decided to write notes today, and I wrote at the top, if you're new, I want to welcome you and tell you that if you get nervous or scared or worried to speak, it's like normal. I'll have 6 years in September, and I still, my brain is kind of like, I don't know if I have ADHD, but it like bounces back and forth. And usually what really helps me to kind of connect back to myself and what I'm doing is I talk about it. So if I get nervous or if I start stuttering, I'd rather just say it before. so that I could just let it flow, right? Because I like to like pray and meditate before I did it today as well, before I did this, and kind of like just try to be a vessel and not really focus on like my own insecurities of when I'm saying something correctly or incorrectly. So I decided to say that so I could go back when I start to stutter or start to breathe. So yeah, so the only thing that I wanted to say about the last thing about like what it was like before was I was a full-blown alcoholic, and I thought that I had figured it out. Like I mentioned before, I started to use opiates, heavy drugs, and to me that was my solution because I was able to go to school and not be a horrible girlfriend and not get into fights and all of this stuff. And there's the line in the book where it says alcohol became my master. I experienced that later on with other drugs, and I understand that I will always remember the day that I basically, in my opinion, like gave up my soul, because I was told that if I continue on this path that I'm going to get sick and I probably shouldn't, and I said that I don't care, I just want to. So I wanted to mention that. On the flip side, I wanted to today talk about my topic is spiritual experience and spiritual growth. And a little kind of with my backstory is like I'm from a Jewish home, but we weren't religious. So we were like for like Hanukkah or like Passover, we went to like the synagogue, and like from the side it was like we're Jewish. But I grew up in a Soviet home where none of my family members believed in God. They believed that like you work hard for what you get. So there was never a talk about God. And I actually really quickly decided that I want to go to the big book, and then I'll go back and explain why I decided to do this. And I want to read, where is it? On page 567, I would like to read in the book about what it says is a spiritual experience. It's only a page, so we have time. The term spiritual experience and spiritual awakening are used many times in this book, which upon careful reading shows that personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism and drugs has manifested itself among us in many different forms. Yet it is true that our first printing gave many readers the impression that these personality changes or religious experience must be the nature of sudden and spectacular upheavals. Happily for everyone, this conclusion is erroneous. So the book kind of talks about that, because if you know anything about the big book, Bill Wilson like had a burning bush experience where like one day like he just says how like God comes to him and he like sees the light. And here it kind of talks about like that isn't what most people experience. In the first few chapters, a number of sudden revolutionary changes are described. Though it was not our intention to create such an impression, many alcoholics have nevertheless concluded that in order to recover, they must acquire an immediate and overwhelming God conscience. So here it starts talking about a God conscience, followed at once by a vast change in feeling and outlook. Among our rapidly growing membership of thousands of alcoholics, such transformations through frequent are by no means the rule. Most of our experiences are what the psychologist William James called the educational variety, because they develop slowly over a period of time. Quite often, friends of the newcomer are aware of the difference long before he is himself. I underline this is important. He finally realizes that he has undergone a profound alteration in his reaction to life, that such a change could hardly have been brought about by himself alone, right? Because it's talking about God here, that he himself, it couldn't have done it alone. What often takes place in a few months could seldom have been accomplished by years of self-discipline. With few exceptions, our members find that they have tapped an unsuspected inner resource which they presently identify with their own conception of a power greater than themselves. Most of us think this awareness of a power greater than ourselves is the essence of a spiritual experience. Our more religious members call it a God consciousness. Most empathetically, we wish to say that an alcoholic capable of honesty facing his problems in the light of our experience can recover, provided he does not close his mind to all spiritual concepts. He can only be defeated by an attitude of intolerance or belligerent denial. We find that no one need have difficulty with the spirituality of the program. Willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness are the essentials of recovery, but these are indispensable. Okay, so I like that it says this in the book, because when I so I'm going to jump a little back and forth. Originally, when I got sober, I thought that I would have something like this, where like one day I would wake up and I would see the light. And I did have days where I felt that way, but I don't necessarily think that that was my experience. I wrote a little bit of notes. So my first experience, I feel like I had a spiritual experience not sober. So when I was about 17, turning 18, one of my best friends got murdered. And it was like shocking. And I don't think I dealt with the feelings of any of it. And we ended up going in a minivan from California to Texas, where they were burying him, with some of my closest friends. And I said earlier that God wasn't talked about in my home. It was never like, it wasn't talked about. So on our way back, after everything that I had experienced on that trip, we're driving in the middle of Texas in this overheating minivan. It's hot. We're like all tired. We want to get home. And I look out the window and it looks kind of like Texas Chainsaw Massacre vibe. But I do remember that I looked out the window and I said to my friends, God is real. And they look at me like I was crazy. They're like, what? Like, what are you talking about? So why I mention this is because from that moment on, I don't know what it was, but I decided that there is something greater than me, that there is something out there. And until I got sober, I only prayed to God when I was in trouble, when I was doing something wrong, and when I was afraid. And I will say that when I did tap into that, even before I got sober, I somehow always was made it to where I had to be, and I was protected. And I still kind of, I used that, but I wasn't actually seeing that's what was happening. And once I got sober, I'll also say before that kind of counts. So my second time I relapsed, I came to Israel and I got sober, and I went back home and I decided that I can live in a sober living, go to meetings, and still be around people, places, and things, people from my past. So I was basically 1 foot in, 1 foot out in recovery, and I tried it my way. That brought me to a place of, I'll also share, from my first time getting sober, I did create a connection with my higher power, with God. And I feel like it was still kind of in the works, because on the one hand, like I wanted to believe in God, but I wanted to still do things my way and be in self. And what that led me to is being miserable, sober, right? I was full of anxiety, full of fear, and I wanted to die because I wasn't surrendering. I wasn't letting go, and I was still holding on to my old life, into which every day I would just thank God at the end of the day for making it through the day and being sober. But eventually, like, I was just sitting on that, I would call it like what, a muscle, or I don't know what, but eventually I did end up using, and I would call it my second rock bottom, to where I now knew things about I knew the instruments and the tools of the program, and I used, and I was even more miserable. So here I am in a place now where I have lost this connection that I once had to something. And I understand that I can't use anymore because it's even more painful. And I learned that I'm supposed to talk about my feelings and shit. And like, it basically turned into like this salad bowl where I was in the wrong neighborhood with the wrong people, and I was crying and I just wanted somebody to care. and I wanted to share my feelings. And I was just, which brought me once again to, I guess God wanted me to be in Israel, because even then I was like, I need to go to Israel. Like, as long as I go to Israel, like, I'll be okay. And I came back to Israel again. And this time I think that I was fully, in a good way, at my spiritual bottom, because I no longer felt anything and I just wanted to die, and I didn't have the guts to do it. So it was just like this like ball of self-pity, self-loathing, and poor me, and nobody's ever going to love me. I'm never going to be with anyone. And I think within about 21 days after I got sober, something shifted, and I began to do the things that I knew that I could do, even though I was in treatment then, that would make me feel good. And that's writing gratitudes, uh, writing to God in a journal. I still do to this day. I wasn't really meditating yet, but even just being of service. The more that I went through a lot of I'm still super selfish, but I know from my experience that whenever I step out of self and I'm there for someone else, like, I feel amazing, and I'm not in my head, and I don't feel crazy. So the reason I'm sharing all this is that I want to lead up to that. It took me to lose all connection to want it back, because I understood that I no longer could live in the world that I lived before, because I couldn't from my relapse, and I didn't want to be miserable and be sober. So I think that I was, what's the word that I'm looking for? This is the simplest word. I was that, oh my God, it's at the tip of my tongue. Doesn't matter. So I was that, like, at my bottom, that I was willing to do whatever it took this time and actually listen to the suggestions. So the suggestion was right away to get a sponsor. I found a woman that I love, that is to this day my sponsor, that I feel like, like when souls meet and they're supposed to be in each other's lives, that's how I feel about my sponsor. She shared her story, and it was my story, that like there were no hell, the the people were a little different, and the location, but everything else was the same. How we were both chameleonaires, how we changed with our environment, how we changed for our boyfriends, our friends. And so, okay, so the part next part, so this is where I want to talk about, like, spiritual experience. So I started to work the steps. I started to listen to my sponsor. I would call her for suggestions. I was of service. I was doing all the things that were recommended to me. And in return, I still decided to get into a relationship when it wasn't recommended, then maybe I should. But actually, you know what? My sponsor said that if I pray around it and it feels like this is supposed to be, then I should then see what answer comes up and just be ready to walk through the pain when it gets painful. And so I move out with my boyfriend, and where we were both in the program. And what ends up happening is he doesn't stay sober. And this for me is like a pivotal moment in my recovery, because I understand now that one of the biggest spiritual experiences that I first had was this, because I was in so much pain when it happened. But when I was looking at him and seeing what he was going through for the first time in my life, I didn't have the desire to use. It didn't look appealing to me, and it no longer looked like an option. So now I can see that what really happened was I had a spiritual experience, and I was restored to sanity, because at the time, I guess I couldn't see it, because I was I was still in a place where I had these expectations that we were supposed to be together, and we were supposed to live happily ever after, and that I cared what people would think about what happened. And I had to, like always, go back to the basics and a lot of prayer, a lot of meditation, a lot of being of service, and a lot of pain. Like that year in my sobriety, it was painful, but the pain, all the pain each time that I would let go of these ideas or beliefs of how my life is supposed to look and truly surrender, I would grow every single time. And what that looks like today, the same thing kind of goes today, right? So this keeps happening in my life over and over again. I wrote here, the idea of having a spiritual experience is a shift in perspective. Slowly happens over time. The shift in feeling and thinking, the belief system, it turns into a different perspective. So what does that mean for me? Meaning they don't change, meaning my boyfriend didn't change, my friends didn't change, the way I used to speak to myself didn't change. I decided to start to do something differently. And okay, let me think how I want to put my thoughts together now. I want to kind of like wrap it up to basically what it's like now going through this, because this keeps happening. And I like to, I don't know, for me, I like to use the word like level up. So thank God the obsession to use has been lifted. The desire, it's been lifted. And now life happens, right? The gifts started to happen. Eventually my partner, did get sober, is sober. And what's helped me is like surrendering in that too. I had to get to a place where I have to look at my world and the idea of that we may not be together or we may be together, and to look at both sides and let go, because I'm not running the show, right? God is. And every time that I do that, I'm able to not obsess and not think that I am running the show, because what ends up happening, like I said, is I go to a place of like, still, right, in sobriety, I still go to, if I'm not surrendering, I go to a place of obsession and pain. And as I said, life continued. Gifts started happening. I had gotten a better job. God gave me a baby in Israel. Like all the things that I ever wanted were happening. And once I became a mom, I feel like a part of me, it took me a very long time to once again begin to do the things that I know that make me feel good. I kind of put that aside and I started to feel started to not feel like I'm surrendering or that I'm at peace. I was in stress and worried all the time. And this has happened over the years. And each time it happens, it gets painful. And then I understand, okay, you're once again thinking that you got this, that you have the answers, that you can fix this, when in reality, I'm not. It's always God. It's always been God. And today, I also feel like this is still happening all the time, especially like right now. I will say in the last month of my life, I feel like I've had another spiritual experience. Like it may have not been as big as the last one, but I'm continuing to change and evolve in the way that I connect to my higher power, the way that I let go. And let me think how I want to say this. Basically, it still happens, right? That I get nervous. Like right now, I don't know why I lose my train of thought and I get nervous, but it's fine. I refuse to worry about it. I caught my thought. Okay, so now I feel like I'm facing like a whole new level of getting to know myself, because what was serving me before, the amount of things that I was doing to work on myself, I feel like I was somewhat getting by. But now that I've decided that I started to do Coda, right? So I think that a lot of my behaviors that I have as a an alcoholic. If you're an alcoholic or addict, I think that Coda aligns with that. And it's kind of more about the emotional sobriety part, to where over the past few years, I struggle with people pleasing, perfectionism, um, needing you to be okay, showing up for people that are unavailable. There's a lot of different patterns that I have that I definitely have. And like I said, when I got sober this time, I decided that I wanted to be happy and that I don't want to be miserable. And when the questions go, it throws me off, but it's fine. And so things have been coming up lately where I see that things that used to serve me no longer serve me. I am a very like transparent person, and I need there to be truth in things to be okay, right? Then it goes back to what it said: willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness. So I have those three principles. Sometimes I have them consciously and sometimes they're subconsciously, but they're embedded in me. So when things start to feel like they are not right for me, I already kind of trained the muscle that I need to pick up the phone and I need to call someone and talk about it and figure out what I should do next to do something about it. Because if I don't do anything about it, the lesson is repeated. The lesson keeps getting repeated till I decide to do something differently about it. And this especially is coming up now in my emotional sobriety. The way that I talk to myself, the way that I talk to people. What are my motives? Uh, am I also with my daughter? Like, what I want to be able to not put on her my defects of characters, my traumas. I see that if I don't work on these things, they say that if we don't work on our traumas and we heal our inner child, we basically become our mothers. And my mother's a wonderful person, but there's many things that I don't want to pass on. So then I can basically give an example recently that I had where I work with women in a sober living. I'm their counselor, and a very uncomfortable situation happened where things got messy towards the girls there. Usually I'm able to pray and show up and be there for them, right? The lines kind of get crossed because we talk about being of service. And then here I have this job where I'm supposed to be of service and it's supposed to be my job. So I get really confused, and I basically I hate when I get like this, when I get nervous. So something came up where through the help of actually one of my sponsees who's here, who I feel like has outgrown me in many ways spiritually, had helped me be able to understand what was happening to me. Because the minute that so basically the conversation I had was where someone that I'm supposed to be on watching over talked about maybe taking my position. And in that moment I felt unsafe. I felt unappreciated. I felt betrayed. I felt all of these things. And on my own, I wasn't able to actually connect to yet. Hopefully one day I will be, to what was really going on to me and what happened and how I show up from the moment that I feel this way. And that lesson in itself, going through it and connecting to what really happened to me and why I was showing up a certain way, was in itself a spiritual experience, because it was so painful. Even though if you ask someone else, maybe nothing really that deep happened, but for me it was deep because it connected to my inner kid, the one that hasn't fully healed and clearly went through some shit like that when she was a kid, and we haven't fixed it yet. That the minute that I feel attacked, betrayed, laughed at, not good enough, all these different things, I go to fear and I go to self and I go into fight or flight and I got to fix it. And I start to try to control things, and the things that start happening, coming out of my mouth, they are no longer serving God, myself, or anyone around me. They're just self-seeking because I want to fix everything in that moment because I need you to be okay, so that I can be okay. And I don't want to be like that. I want to be able to be okay no matter what I want, and it's practice. It's like the same muscle, like it's a whole nother beast, I feel like, of learning to be conscious with oneself, taking a pause, connecting to my true self, connecting to God in that moment, and asking myself, what's going on here right now? Are we going into a place where we feel those things? And what's like, what are our motives? And I'll say from what happened a week later, after I did an inventory on it, I spoke to a lot of people about it. I prayed around it. I spoke to my sponsor. I spoke to my Coda sponsor about it. I spoke to my sponsee. I spoke to another person that I connect with. I got different suggestions. I did inventory and I went deeper. And throughout all of that, I had another experience. And I want to say, I shared this before, that for me, it was like a big deal that I was in a similar situation the following week, and I didn't show up the same way. Like that's it. That is it. The aha moment, the aha moments in my life where I was like, oh, I am capable with connecting to myself and God to not go there, because what happens when I go there, I don't feel good. I feel shitty. I do this thing where I go back and I replay the situations. I think of the worst thing that could happen. And in these moments, like, I'm not being my true self. I'm not connected to God, because when I am connected to God and my true self, that is serenity. That's when I'll also share, like, I'm going to be 35 tomorrow, and don't feel 35. I want to say I don't feel internally a day over like 18 or 19. I feel like I've been sober for about 6 years. So I feel like somewhere like that, that's where I'm at internally. Maybe that's not true, but what a blessing it is that I have changed my life 360, or is that 180? Okay, doesn't matter. Where I'm going with is that if you knew me before, I was a walking tornado who thought who thought I was a gangster, who was delusional and was super self-absorbed and didn't know how to show up in relationships. I didn't know how to be a friend. I didn't know how to be a daughter. I definitely didn't know how to be a mother. And through this book, this work, right? Because if I'm sponsoring someone, one of the first things I could ask them is like, what is this book about? Like, what is this about? What is the 12 steps for? And usually they'll answer like, it's to get sober, right? Because they want to get sober, because like that's the main concern. The reality is this book isn't about that. It's about having a spiritual experience. It's about coming to the mindset, the shift. That's what the book is about. And I'm fully just grateful to this book, because it was the foundation, and it's still like what I take women through the 12 steps, through the big book, but it's the foundation that gave me the part of me that I want more. Like, I understand that I feel good when I'm physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually doing something with myself. What does that look like today? Meaning that I need to be praying and I need to be meditating. I started to write, since that situation happened, I started to write gratitudes again every day. I'm thankful for having that experience, because it was like, okay, Ina, and like God's telling me like, oh, okay, Ina, you want to see what happens when you try to take your will back? Well, here you go. And then I understand that I'm not in control. And the more that I like let go and let God in, meaning when I write and I journal, I write like, I welcome you into every aspect of me, which I was scared to do for a long time. May it be in my home, with my partner, with my workplace, with food, with everything. Like I welcome you because I know because I know that that's what makes me feel better. And lastly, that I want to share is also like, I think that what comes up is like, it took me until the age of 35 and to be sober. You know, I didn't like finish college, and I didn't do a lot of things that I probably should have because I was too busy being a menace to society for decades of my life and thinking that I was a gangster. That I did a meditation before I did came on here, and it was like about gratitude. And if like I look at the big picture, like when I talked about like emotional sobriety, like I've come a long way. Like I have been through some stuff, and I need to learn to, one of the other things is to be more graceful to myself and to be okay in the place that I'm in, and to trust and to have faith in God in all my affairs. And it took me, like I said, till I was like about this year for God to do what I can't do for myself, meaning taking me out of my old workplace where I do love to help people, but the politics, the bureaucracy that came with it was making me miserable. That I started to paint again. And I used to paint when I was in active addiction, but I would paint like through my pain. And for many years, I thought that I couldn't do that anymore because it reminded me of my old life. But it turns out like that's what makes me happy. And I am so grateful through this program and all the experiences that I've been to, that I've been able to connect to my inner child and the things that make me happy. And I'm becoming a professional face painter. And it's really, really scary because it's new and it takes me out of my comfort zone on a daily basis. I'm doing a lot of prayer, letting go, and taking action. So I'm practicing honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness, prayer, action, letting go. And I keep going and I keep going, and things come up because they're new for me. But I know that like, if I really like sit here with you, like that God has my back, that the signs or the little moments, the aha moments are there, that God has my back. And like, that's what makes me happy. It makes me happy to be like I said, a transparent, honest person who's doing creative stuff and being like a good mom and a good friend. Like that's that's the woman that God would want me to be. That's been taking me a long journey to get to her, because for the longest time I didn't, and I was kind of maybe ashamed that that's who I am. When I got sober, like I was ashamed of the colors I liked and my bubbly personality and all of these things. And you know, I ask God every day to like help me show up and be the woman that He wants me to be. I ask Him to guide my thoughts and my actions, and I ask Him to lead me where He needs me. And so far this year, like that's when it's flowing and it feels right. Like I feel like that's God, and that's where He's brought me to today. So I don't know how long that I've been sharing for. I have a question. I don't know. Is it when we okay? We'll do the prayer at the end too. I guess I'll just talk about it too. So when I was asked to do this, I just don't know the format fully, but
yeah, sorry, you're good. I had a little technical issue here pressing on the screen.
So I wanted to ask.
You're good. Go ahead.
Yeah. Can I bring up the prayer that I wanted to talk about kind of now? Because it kind of goes in with everything that I said.
Absolutely.
Okay. So my favorite prayer is the set aside prayer. And there's a lot of versions. Like if you go on Google, you can find a lot of different versions. So I'm going to read the base of it and then explain to people here how I use it, because I think it's like the most, for me, powerful prayer that I have used, at least mine, right? So the prayer goes like, it's the set aside prayer, and it's like a version I found right now. It says, God, please enable me to set aside everything I think I know about myself, the 12 steps, this book, the meetings, my disease. And then I add people in society. And then I wrote, and I ended with, and most of all, you, God. And then it goes, so I may have an open mind and a new experience with all these things. Please help me see the truth. Right. But the beauty about this is, right, is like that we can always make something our own. And my sponsor taught me to use this in all my affairs, meaning after we, before, I like to say most of all, you, God, at the end, because without God, I feel like I couldn't do any of it and I don't know shit. So I leave God for the very last, but in between where I wrote, I know where I asked, set aside everything I know about myself, the 12 steps, this book, the meetings, my disease. There in that moment, you can say it in your heads or you can write it in your notebooks like me, which really helps. I connect to whatever I'm going through in life at that moment. I ask to be a better mom, to believe in my career path, to let go of what people think about me, to remove my defects, to not eat so much. Whatever it is, I can put that there because the last line is the most powerful, right? It says, please help me see the truth. So if I'm being open-minded and willing and honest with myself, and I'm open to like a God conscience where I'm not afraid to see the truth in something, that in itself is like something, right? Because that is letting go and not thinking that, not even expecting that we know what's the answer. When you ask to see the truth in something, God delivers. It may not show up the way that you think it will. It may not look the way that you think that it will, but God always delivers. You know, I'll say one of my last things that I'll close it with. I don't know how long I've been talking for, but what I want us to close it with. So when I got pregnant with my daughter, people in my life were not happy for me, especially close family people, because they remembered the old Ina, the tornado Ina, and they didn't really, because I lived in Israel, get to know the new Ina, the upgraded, leveled up, conscious God light Ina. And my father told me that I should have an abortion. And it was like the most hurtful thing, probably. But I went to God and and I cried a lot and I spoke to a lot of people and I whooped out this prayer. And I started to ask to see the truth in having my baby, my daughter, because of my experiences and not believing in myself. For even, I'll say for 1 second, I actually thought about what he said because I was afraid. And once I asked to see the truth about having my daughter, within a few days, it didn't matter if I went left or right. Wherever I walked on the street, I just saw mothers with their children. I saw babies in their carriages. I saw like all these and I knew like that was it. Like that I need to like walk through this fear and have this baby, even though I didn't have a work visa. I didn't have health insurance in this country. I didn't have a lot of the things that I probably should have had to have my baby, but I put all my faith in God and it all worked out the minute that I let go. So I think that that's kind of like the last thing that I want to say. I hope that I said something that helps someone. Thank you.
Wow, I know. Thank you. That was so special. I know that I wrote down a bunch of questions and just right with you on the set aside prayer and miracles happening as a part of this program. So thank you.
You're so welcome.
I think it's cool that you're 35 because I consider you really young. If anyone wants to pop in their questions in the chat, we'll take them. I see that we have one from Laura about how do you define serenity? So what does serenity mean?
So I think I kind of said it because like when my brain, when it sees the questions, it would go like, it would automatically like start thinking about the question. So I think I kind of said it there. I think serenity for me is once I get to a place, right, which doesn't happen, we're human, and I would love to be one day at a place where like something could come up in my life and I could be like, oh, let me pray about that and like let go and be like have serenity. I'm not there yet, maybe one day that I'll be there. But for me, serenity is once I've taken a deep dive into whatever it is that's going on in my life in that moment, I think, and being able to be honest with myself and what it's doing to me and is it serving me, praying around it and letting go of the outcome. And serenity also looks like for me today, if I wait, since I went through that experience, I once again, like I said, I became a mom. I was busy at work and stuff. I stopped praying and meditating every morning and writing gratitudes. And I feel much more serenity when I'm implementing all those tools. Also, I like to do the 3rd and 7th step prayer. And making sure that whatever it is that I'm doing in that day is being of service to others and to what feels good to my soul. I think that also for me is serenity. And the most serenity I probably feel is being a mom, because when when I'm with her alone at night and I remember that this is all that I ever really wanted and none of it all really matters, what people think about me, where I am in my career path, none of it really matters. That to me is serenity, when I'm able to just like hold her hand and be present with her and be in the moment.
Wow, that's really beautiful. I definitely relate to that, hugging a sleeping child or seeing them at night. And those of you moms on the line who actually find parenting really stressful, don't get too jealous. We understand you too.
No, it's not always like that. She's definitely not always like that. But at the end of the day, she's peaceful when she's sleeping.
What I'm hearing in that is like, one, the first part of what you answered is, you get to serenity when you put your spiritual life first. You came to Israel, you connected to motherhood when you, like our big book says, when you put the spiritual life first, before financial matters, before physical matters, that stuff starts falling into place. Not your career, not your, next big hunk, not, whatever, not fame, not fortune. That's when things fall into place. And about having a daughter, and everybody, take this in whatever way you identify. But when I'm hearing what Ina said, and I'm obviously biased because I'm a mother, when she's connected to her role and what she feels God wants of her, there's peace in that. So when you're doing, if you think you need to be a parent, bring more life into this world, fine. If you think you need to save the whales, fine. That's where the serenity comes when we're asking, like our big book tells us, how can I be helpful, right? My new job is to be helpful. That's our new job, not counselor, not manager, not director, just, queen of helpful, king of helpful. Maybe you could tie that into us, or also asked about your favorite passage in the big book. I'll modify the question because I saw you answered some of that, but talk to us about some of the big book passages that you like live with daily, that are your daily Bible.
So I can't say that I use this all the time, but I think I don't remember what page it's on. I feel embarrassed to say that, but the example about the director in the show, I think that is my favorite thing in the book about the director and the show. Someone who remembers, tell me exactly what page it's on.
I think 63.
Oh, amazing. Great.
Yeah, 63.
No. It basically talks about how, here it is. It's actually it starts on page 60 to 61. And one of the things that early on, that was when I went through the steps that my sponsor did with me, the way we went through it, is where it says his, or when it talks about he. On page 61, the book says he. So my sponsor was like, I want you to read it from a place where wherever it says he, I want you to write Ina. And the minute the example talks about the being the director of a show, and I'll use myself as an example because that's what I was saying. So if Ina's arrangements would only stay put, if only people would do as Ina wished, the show would be great. Everybody, including Ina, would be pleased. Life would be wonderful. In trying to make these arrangements, our actor may sometimes be quite virtuous. Ina may be kind, considerate, patient, generous, even modest and self-sacrificing. On the other hand, Ina may be mean, egotistical, selfish, and dishonest. But as with most humans, Ina is more likely to have varied traits. What usually happens, the show doesn't come off very well. Ina begins to think life doesn't treat her right. Ina decides to exert herself more. Ina becomes on the next occasion still more demanding or gracious, as the case may be. So I can keep reading. I don't know what time is this meeting over at?
Finish it, Paul, but this is great. This is a great place to
Great. So if you I would recommend to anyone, if you've never done this, it starts on the bottom of the first requirement. So on page 60, and it goes all the way to, I would say, to the second paragraph of 62. And this was like, this I needed to hear, and I needed to hear Ina. I needed to hear it, not just like he, but I needed to connect it to myself, because this is me. This has been me since I was a child. This is me in active addiction. And this is also me in sobriety when I'm in self. This is the best example that you can have. So like, even the example that I spoke about, that happened to me, like I was there. This was me. I was in self because I could be the most kind, amazing person, so kind and generous. But the minute you make me feel threatened, and if I'm not in a good spiritual place, I retaliate. I become manipulative. I become vindictive. It's still there. So this is amazing. Is my favorite. I needed this, the type of person that I am. So it starts on page 60 at the bottom. After it says the first requirement is that we be convinced that any life run on self-will, because this is the best, in my opinion, example, a self-will run riot that the book talks about, right? If we are not doing a step 3 and turning our will and our lives over to God, we are in a self-will run riot.
This is so great. I'm going to encourage all you all to get your big books and write. Karen thinks she's quite virtuous. Karen thinks she's doing all this service. Just the other day I was helping out my landlord, and I felt bad for them. The older gentleman, but he wouldn't sign a document saying my lease was over. Even I found him tense. I started yelling. My voice went up a few octaves, and I'm just thinking, I hope, my kids heard that and it all worked out. I don't want them to be left with the fact that, because mom raised her voice, I want them to be left with, no, I talked to my sponsor, and then I prayed, and then I bowed my head, and I made an amends to my landlord, and then it worked out, right? So when Karen's running the show, when Ina's running the show, when all y'all are running the show, like, if you're anything like me, or Ina, like, you make a pretty big mess, right?
Yeah.
So I really want to thank everyone for being here. We're going to have to invite you back, I think. I jotted down a bunch of questions about, spoke about trauma, about healing that. I don't want to get into that because that's kind of a whole nother topic. Maybe we'll save that for another time.
Yeah, definitely.
Go ahead.
I want to say I'm on the 4th step in Coda. So maybe once I go through the steps, I could come back and do my experience in Coda as well.
Brilliant. Yeah, let's be in touch about that. And I think a good place to end is always at the end, right? The end, which is forever, which is step 12. I see that, you've been actively sponsoring. You've got sponsees. I want to encourage everyone on, if you could please put your so people could add you to their God squad, to their fellowship.
I'm definitely willing to sponsees.
What's that? You're looking for sponsees?
No, I'm definitely always willing to take sponsees. I could put my number in the chat if anyone's looking for a sponsor.
Perfect. So if someone's looking for a sponsor, if you have fellows looking for a sponsor, you can share Ina's information with them and they can see if that's a fit. If you want someone more on your God squad, not everyone's always available in the same time zone, or we all work different work schedules. Some of us through the day, some at night. Ina is a woman with experience, strength, and hope that she can share and help you with. So I encourage you all to do that. And maybe before you pray us out, Ina, talk to us about sponsoring, about why the fellows on the line really should get through and live a step 12 of working with others, which, many of the rooms actually fail to mention that.
So you're talking about, the question you said is why it's important to sponsor women or to get a sponsor. Both are important. I just wanted to clarify which one you were talking about.
Yeah, I thought we'd end about talking about sponsoring. Why it's important to sponsor and what you get out of sponsoring.
Yeah, so my experience was when I got sober and started to work the steps, I was so afraid to be someone's sponsor. I was like, how am I supposed to help someone? Like I was so afraid. And what's interesting is my sponsor had a bunch of notes and stuff. And I was like, oh, I need to do that. I need to mammogram like that. And she's like, yeah, it'll help you when you're sponsoring someone. But I was so afraid and not confident in that I could actually help someone that I didn't think that it would ever happen. I ended up going to a convention and I heard a speaker from like Canada or something. And she said one line and she said, how do you know that you're ready to sponsor? And all she said, it was so simple. She said that you have some sort of desire or willingness. And I think after I went to that convention and heard that, within a couple of weeks, like I understood that I had a desire and a willingness. I wasn't fully even through the steps, but I decided that I'm going to start offering to sponsor women. And I'm thankful that I did because it pushed me to get through the steps, get through the work quicker. And each time I read the book with someone, I had another spiritual experience. Each time I read the book over and over again, it doesn't matter how many times I read it, I read or hear something that I didn't hear before. And I also will say that there's something in also letting go and trusting God and not making it about us also in sponsorship, because we think that, oh, now that we're sponsoring, like we have to tell Betsy and Sally that they need to do this. And as long as Betsy and Sally listen, they're going to stay sober. In my first year of sponsoring, none of the girls I sponsored stayed sober. And I was like, I went to my sponsor and I was like, what is this? Like, I don't understand. Like, what am I doing wrong? And she said, you're not doing anything wrong. It's not about you. Like, like she had to remind me because it's not. I'm just the vessel to God's work. I'm here to guide them, to take them to the work, and whatever is supposed to happen is still going to happen regardless. And I needed to go through that because like I said, in the example, I love to make everything about myself. So sponsorship elevates you to another level of being of service, to which in return, you elevate and grow. And, through each person that you take through the work, you kind of peel off your own layers of your own stuff that will come up. And through each other, you're helping one another.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. All you need is a desire and a willingness. Those are some great words of wisdom. I tell people to kind of start promoting their availability to sponsor. It's step 9 already with the guidance I got from Nikki, Noodle It Out with Nikki, is when you're near the finish line, let people know you're going to be available and have that lined up. And on a Coda note, I also identify as a Coda. I'll say that one of the biggest gifts to sponsoring is knowing how to let things end, knowing how to break up with people in a healthy way. For many of us addicts, we've had a lot of, rejection and pain and all of that. And knowing how to, say, this isn't working, this is a waste of time, like the big book says, I can't be helpful to you, or this is not a good match. To learn how to do that in a healthy way is a really big gift, and one that gets us even more happy, joyous, and free. So I know I opened up a big one there, but in the respect for people's time, we'll leave it with a cliffhanger and wait for part 2 of Ina, the Coda experience, strength, and hope. And we'll go ahead and ask you to pray us out, Ina, if you will.
Okay, let's just do the serenity prayer. Let's do the version, our version. Okay, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ina. This is beautiful. You are beautiful. Everyone on this line, you are beautiful. If you'd like to share on the Reco12 podcast, hit me up. I'll put my number in the chat. Go to reco12.com and let us know you have some experience, strength, and hope to share whatever fellowship you're in. Bye-bye.
There was a man put his hand by the side of his mouth, and he wanted to scream, but the sound never came out. So he reached for the bottle to wash the pain away, 'cause what he wanted so badly was to live a different way. And all of his problems and all of his pain filled up the puddle and rose with the rain. His ship kept on sinking to the bottom of the lake. For certain that he was just a fake, just a fake. Was a man put his hand by the side of his mouth, and he wanted to share, but only lies ever came out. So he reached for the needle to numb the pain inside, and the truth that he yearned for shriveled up and died. And all of his problems, all of his pain filled up the puddle, rose with the rain. The ship kept on sinking, bottom of the lake. For certain he was just a fake, just a side of his mouth as he read from the book, only truth spilled out. die.